Dr. Jazz.
Start this like with
Dr.
a
Jazz.
silly question, but maybe even not. Like, where do you get the energy and the creativity ideas for? I mean, you've done so much work, and you just keep going, and it's you're just pushing the boundaries. Like I saw you did the large ensemble again in New York, and but what's your process of work actually? How do you get inspired, and how do you keep going?
I mean, it's there's a wellspring of stuff. You just have to kind of be calm and let it come
Mm.
in, and as you do that, then you never really run out of energy. You might get fatigued
Yeah,
from
sure.
the amount of stuff that comes in, but I have ways to get rid of that. And I mean, meditation helps, and breathing exercises and all that. All those things are really helpful. And every once in a while, just taking a walk and getting off your ass and walking outside, is and looking around. I mean, I happen to be fortunate enough to live where there's still some greenery, in LA, and I can walk around in it's like protected areas. So there's still wildlife there. And matter of fact, every night we're serenaded by coyotes and
Beautiful.
all kinds of stuff. And occasionally there's a mountain lion or something like that,
Yeah.
But so that's not too terrible. And those are easy ways to do things. And also, being at the school, I'm always around kind of people who are younger than I am.
Yeah.
And that is a constant source of, like rejuvenation, because I mean, the kids that come in are virtuosic, so you got to keep up or else they'll kick your ass, so you always want to be the fastest gun, within a certain, in your area at least, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not a person who does everything, but we just had just 2 days ago, Steve Cardenas was
Oh, really?
was in residence, and we were playing monk tunes and some Paul Motion music, which I'd never played before. That was really fun.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
So there's always new stuff coming in, and on the 4th of December, I'm playing some Braxton music as a tribute to Braxton. So you got to hone up on it, especially if I'm playing clarinet parts, like really get on it, and stuff like that. But so there's always something that's not you that's coming in to keep you in motion, and that refreshes what you do.
Yeah.
If you look
That
at what
makes
you
sense.
do in a different way, and every time you do that, you uncover something that's totally different. I mean, oh, there's this. Well, that's kind of cool. I can use it, I know how to use that, but why haven't I done it before? So then you go back and do all the research into that, and it's like, whoa, this is deep. It just keeps going,
Yeah. That's so beautiful.
I'm really fortunate. Plus, the last thing I'll say about it is, like, when I was coming up, I was a visual artist. So I was around a lot of musicians. I mean, I didn't play music until I was 25.
Really?
Yeah, and a lot of people
Oh, wow.
thought, like, that's too late. You can't start doing that. But all these people who were playing music were all playing with, a few were playing with Miles Davis, and some were playing, like rock music, some were playing with Elvin. There was this energy, because the music was changing, when I was in New York. I mean, I think I started traveling around in 71, but from 69, 68, to 71, that's like the entire music just like fractioned off and went someplace else, you know. And I was there during a lot of it, drawing pictures of it and listening to it. So I was very fortunate. And that, to me, that love that all the musicians had, you know, the people coming in from the Chicago scene, the AACM cats like Anthony and Roscoe and all those cats. I mean, it was years later, but I started playing with all those guys. So some of those guys, not all of them, but some of them, you know, and some I became acquaintances with and friends with, you know. And that, again, that's their love for their tradition of the music that carries you, that just carries you across, because there's no time to really slack off, and you can't think about you know. It's like it's like a giant thing, you know.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah. I also have the luxury of having really virtuosic players who can play what I write, like, you know, within a few days of writing it. So I know, like, okay, I got to work on this more, so I don't present that just yet. Let's workshop this a little bit more. Let's do this, you know. I mean, that's wonderful, and I can go someplace like, you know, and do that large ensemble in New York and say, here's the charts, because I know everything's working and everything. It's not going to be the music that's messed up. It's going to be either somebody doesn't want to play it, or I picked the wrong person to play it or not. And luckily, I haven't had that. So that's makes you want to write more, and makes you want to be able to play more, and it makes you want to. I mean, okay, so in LA, you know, I played a lot with John Carter and Bobby Bradford. Okay, that's like, Bob is the last living, you know, link to Ornette Coleman. Really, you know. So I learn all that. Every time we play, I learned something from that. You know, when John was alive, it was like, you know, they never show you anything, but they, like, John would be doing something on the clarinet, and you'd just be listening and go like, oh, how do you
exactly. That's so beautiful.
So it's really inspiring, you know. I mean, even if we're talking about, like we were talking about Miroslav, you know, even just watching Miroslav play at school, it's like, holy crap! Oh, okay. You know, I mean, this is the thing. Like with a lot of those cats, they're not like Romani people, but they're close to it, and they have this casual virtuosity that they just be talking to you, and they're just like rattling off this stuff, and you go, whoa, what? You know, it's just amazing.
Yeah. Do you have, like, when you write music, let's say for the large ensemble or whatever kind of music, do you have like a daily routine, like that you sit down, that you say, I'm gonna compose now or work on music? Or
I write a lot in the nighttime, when it's really quiet, and I in the daytime I make these. I have, you know, tons of these notebooks, and and I'm always sketching around and doing stuff when I'm not practicing. I don't like to write from the horn anymore, because that's limited by like what I can do on the horn or something like that. But every once in a while, for like trio or smaller group, I might do that, you know. But usually it's like I usually get something down almost every day. And that's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, it's not formalized, but I don't like. I talked to Robert Dick once. Robert Dick said, like, he said he has a routine, but it's not a routine because he doesn't like to do the same thing every day. And I thought, like, wow, that's interesting. I like that, you know. And so since talking to him is like, one day might be a flute day. Well, every day is a flute day, because if you miss 2 days, you're screwed, So, so one day might be like focus on the flute and then practice, clarinet a little while just to get that happening, and then go back to the flute because they're opposite enemies with the embouchure. So you do that, and then you go back, and then and you feel, okay, I've got that basic day down, and then you can work on. For me, usually it's like learning music I have to play now, and don't see, and then every once in a while it's like you might hit something on YouTube or something where it's somebody presenting some multiphonics, and you go like, oh, that's how they do it. Okay, I get that sound, but I don't do it that way. So I have a backlog of information in my head and stuff. And I'm also horn geek kind of. I kind of like look around to see like what's happening with horns and stuff like. So it's a pretty full day. Then I have teaching stuff.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah, and that keeps you on it too, because every time you think you know what they're going to ask you or what you're going to work on, it's usually something totally different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We mentioned this large ensemble, and I watched the stream from Roulette, right? It was like a 40th.
Oh, you broke up there.
Oh, yeah, I'm saying that I watched.
I didn't hear what you did.
Like the stream of I watched the stream of the large ensemble from Roulette from New York, and just first of all, I know you did like started with the large ensembles in the 80s, and but let's say this ensemble that you had now in New York, how do you lead such a beast? How do you present the music? And especially dealing with a large ensemble, all these guys are also like, many of them are incredible composers and band leaders actually. And how do you approach this project actually, or how did you? I mean, and where did the initial idea came from in the 80s? I mean, this is like a huge undertaking to do such a thing.
Well, LA is a kind of a weird, special place. What was happening? This is probably around 80, 81. From the time that I really thought about playing music and really thinking about just doing that, I always wanted to have a big group that would do kind of what it does now. And at that time, I didn't know as many people, and it started out as a 14-piece group. And one of the ideas was LA is incredibly spread out. The builders of it, instead of going up, because you can't because of the earthquakes, so they went wide. By doing that, they isolated like little areas of people, and of course, music is one of the casualties of that. There are pockets of like creative people all over LA. Some live in Pasadena, some live in Watts, some live, like out here in Valencia. So some live like in close to Long Beach and stuff. So my idea was to bring all the different camps together of people who improvise. Okay. And that's why I started it originally. And then as time went on, then I started getting hooked on like writing for larger groups, like in terms of an orchestra. And so I didn't want to do the big band thing because that has a specific sound, and it also has, there's a tradition of how you write for the big band like that, and I didn't want to do that. So I'd always had an interest in classical music and chamber music. My mom played some at around the house when I was growing up, and so I started going in that direction. And when I got the job at Cal Arts, then it just blew open because I was around new. That's one of the main things the school does, is kind of new music and electronic music. So I mean, we have other stuff too. A great world music department. I don't like that word, but that's what it's called.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
a good and a very good jazz department. But the thing that was most intriguing to me was was having all these new virtuosic, new classical musicians. And so I started incorporating that more into looks like I froze.
Yeah, but yeah, I hear you well, Vinny. It's
You
good.
hear me? Okay.
Yeah, it's super.
Okay. So I started using more of those classical musicians, and that changed the music. And as time went on, that music changed more and more to like where it is now. Okay,
Yeah.
so that means that you have to always have those kind of musicians. I started going more towards this. Like I said, you need like really fine musicians to do that. So just before COVID, um, there was a opportunity to do a concert in New York, and I asked if I could do something bigger because I had done usually quartets or quintets, and the people there said, "Sure, this is we'll give you this much money." But I decided to spend a little more of my money and make the band like 30 pieces, and I just called and emailed people that I knew,
Oh, okay.
and some of them, like Tim was in, like for example, Tim Byrne, he was in the very first large ensemble concert in 1982. So he's of course knows how the music goes. So he said sure, and then these other people that I had only talked to and heard about, I talked a little bit with Jack Walrath, but we never met in person.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Said, "Oh man, I'm sure I'd love to do it," and I was thrilled because he's one of my favorites.
Oh man, he's like
And Thomas Heber, he had played in 1988. He had played with I did a concert for the WDR, and they got me a number of musicians, and I got to bring 5 of my musicians, and we did a 20 something piece large group for a festival there. And so I knew him, and he was living in New York now. So I asked him, and he said, "Sure," and it kind of went like that. And only a few people, couldn't do it. Ed Neumeister was involved all the way up until a couple of weeks before, and then he got a big tour he couldn't turn down. And same with Steve Swell.
Sure. Yeah.
So those two really fun. Both happen to be trombone players. Both couldn't do it, and a few other people had moved out of town, like Taylor Hobynum had moved out of town. But all the people. So then there were new people that came, like from recommendations of others, and they really fit the bill. Like the guitarist.
Oh yeah, Greg, who plays with Tim a lot. Yeah.
Nels Cline recommended him because Nels couldn't do it, So there were a few recommendations, but people had heard, they knew who I was, so they didn't think it was going to be like horrible. So they said yes, and I was thrilled. And we got a really, really fine group, and it worked out really. I thought it worked out really well. We only have one rehearsal, so everybody so everybody had worked their ass off on the parts because they're not easy. And when I got there, was very, very easy to do. Some of the people were also acquainted with hand signals and whiteboard a lot. So they were all kind of familiar with that, and people who weren't familiar jumped on it really fast. So that worked out it was just fine.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful. Yeah.
I was quite happy that the solos were brilliant. everybody fit right in. I thought the vibes in marimba playing was spectacular. Everyone was good. Everyone was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a beast to lead such an orchestra. That's just like, it's incredible. It's such an undertaking. It's like, you know, just to write music and to lead,
the part that's scary is the conducting part because you know, these cats are on it and you can't make any mistakes, right? You could see, like, I stopped the concert in one part where it's just like I stop and then we start over again. I go like this and we start over. That's because the chart was in 5 and I started counting in 4.
4, yeah.
I didn't look down at the paper. I was getting everybody in. I just went, you know, right, and I'm going, and they're playing what's on the page, and I realized, like, oh fuck, okay, and you know,
yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, I love that. That's a cool one. No, but
so
fantastic.
I have a question for you. At the beginning of your thing, there's guitar and alto.
Yeah.
Who's the alto player?
His name is Achille Succi. He's from Italy. I played with him really a lot. He
sounds good.
He's amazing, man. Bass, clarinet, and alto. I'll send you some links, like, of what we did. He's killing.
He sounds really good. It's a nice introduction.
Yeah, we did this for an album, and I just cut this one duo piece that we had. I was like, oh man, this sounds cool. So, like, a nice one. Thank you. Yeah. I'll send you some links of his. He's such an underrated player. Like, so good. Italy.
You know, that's a funny thing. Like most of the players in Italy are underrated. Definitely. They don't really seem to get a lot of. I mean, not that. Not Slovenia gets a fair amount of press coverage either, but I mean, like, it seems like the people who get the least amount of press coverage for their work are like Italy and Canada, and maybe some players in Japan.
Yeah.
Seems like no one talks about any of that stuff. That goes in like waves. Like now, people are more interested in, like, that Scandinavian, because they're using a lot of Scandinavian music in TV show, film music. So there's an interest in that, you know. Then there's then that'll happen for a while, and then maybe somebody might look at Australia for a while, you know, and then someplace else. And it's funny how that goes.
Yeah, it's bizarre, but there's so many players everywhere. I mean, I'm always surprised, you know, to see how many players there are. In every country. Scary. It's scary, actually. Yeah.
And the level is very good.
It's incredible. Yeah.
I don't know if that's because of now people are going to school more or what, but you know, I mean, there's also, in some players, you know, there's a sameness
that's also true. Yeah, afterwards. You
know, because everything is taught pretty much the same way, you know, kind of scale to chord method, you know. So I was actually talking to somebody about Artie Shaw. He had this big hit beginning, and his solo is, there's a video clip from a movie where he plays a beautiful solo. It's a little short, but it's really nice, very lyrical. And I told somebody, like if that was somebody playing today, all you would hear is patterns. You wouldn't hear the melody at all.
Yeah.
You would hear, you know, you know, you wouldn't hear any of the melody whatsoever, you know. That kind of bugs me a little bit, and that's something like that I'm working on, and my own stuff is like where my improv relates to what's just written music, you know, how you can make it so that and this carries over into the larger ensemble, is like how you can make the improv seem composed, and the composed music like it's improvised,
to blur the border.
And that's something like from hanging with people like Julius and Jewish Hempel, and even talking once to Sun Ra, is like, his idea was like, well, there's 30 people in a band, there should be 30 voices, and Julius was like 10 people, 10 parts.
Yeah.
And that's something like, I try to reconcile. It isn't till unless like recently where I started to work more where two voices play the same line in octaves and stuff like that. You go back to Stravinsky and you listen to how he has like a piccolo and bass clarinet.
Yeah.
Something like that, or E flat clarinet, more so in his case, E flat clarinet and bass clarinet. Those are some really nice moments in the symphony, and then I'm thinking like, well, maybe everything doesn't have to be different all the time, give it a rest, because people like Ken Filiano, for example, like I play with him quite a bit, and he's a very, very astute musician, and one of a kind. One of the few people you'll ever improvise with. You never know what's going to happen. That's, with other people, you kind of know, like, you're going to get this at some point in the improv.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
We're going to go here because they like to go there, Okay, that's fine. But with Ken, nothing. You don't know. You can't tell, but we were talking and he was talking about like, oh, I like the music. This was something in the past. I like the music, but it's constantly moving. He said, there's no place for it to rest. And I said, oh, that's interesting. So let me look into this, and then you can get that motion, but you can still get a sense of rest when you start using more. Some unisons, it gives the listener a chance to really sink in, and it gives you a chance to really like flesh out your idea before you messing with it again. Yeah. It's kind of things like when you're playing with these musicians that are like I was talking about before, they have their foot in one camp of classical music and one camp of improvised music and one the other foot in jazz. They make these observations that further your own music.
Yeah.
When you listen to them, it's like they open a scope that's quite mind-boggling, because you get out of your routine really fast. If you
that's so important.
Yeah. It's a curious thing.
Yeah, it is definitely. Yeah. Vinny, I wanted to ask you this. You mentioned you started as a visual artist, and you mentioned sketching musicians. How did that work? I mean, like, what does that mean? Does it like, did you go to concerts or like in the 60s or mid 60s or?
Well, I had gotten out of college and I was working around and doing things. I was teaching grade school, because I had kind of
really?
I knew that I wasn't going to make a great living as a painter, because most of the painters that I really liked were really poor, So I thought like, okay, I'll have this job, teaching. And I was painting at home, and then I started to think about I always painted listening to music. So I put this, but in those days we had LPs and we just put stacks of them on this thing. You could put 5 comfortably and could stretch it a little bit, and you could paint for a long time and really do that. I did some kind of semi-fine work with blending and shading and colors. So I decided, well, one day I was talking to somebody and they said, well, you really like this jazz stuff, right? And I said, yeah. They said, you could go see that, right? And I said, really? Now, this is how naive I was at the time. I had gone to Indian music concerts, saw Ravi Shankar and Ali Akbar Khan, Um, um, I was big into the folk thing because my friends were all folkies. So we went to the like Cafe One, 8th Street Cafe, and all these places to see Richie Havens, John
Mm.
Fay,
Oh,
on and
yeah.
on and on. So, but it never dawned. And rock concerts, of course, was the Fillmore East. So, I mean, I even saw it. I was even at that show, at a Hendrix show, a New Year's Eve one,
Mm.
the last band. Yeah. So, I
Oh,
mean,
man.
like, I saw him when he opened for Cream, and then I saw Cream open for him. I mean, I saw him a ton of times
That's amazing.
at the Fillmore. So, but it never dawned on me that you could go see these cats that I loved. I mean, so my friend said, "Yeah, you should go to this place called Slugs in the Village." He said, "I saw Coltrane there play with Eric Dolphy," and I said, "Oh,
Mm.
wow, okay." So this is like 67 or so, and the next record I bought was Expression. Coltrane was dead, so I couldn't see him anymore. So
Oh, shit.
I made a vow to myself, like, well, I'm going to Slugs from now on to see all these people I like, because they could die at any moment. And so could I, but I didn't think about that.
Sure.
So so I started going there, and then I was listening to music, and then I would get these ideas for painting, and then I started doing that, and then I started sketching. And by started sketching, I started to meet, like, cats would come over because they'd see me doing this kind of stuff and they'd be curious. So people would start to come to the table. So one night I'm getting up and there's this big hand on my thing. It's a black guy. And I'm like, oh, here we go again. Because I had had a couple of altercations. Uh, uh, I look up and it's Pharoah Sanders. And
Oh,
he goes,
man. Wow.
he says, "Oh, excuse me. I didn't mean to startle you." I said, "Oh, no." I said, he says, "I'm Pharoah Sanders." I said, "I know." I said, "I love your music." I said, "Are you playing here soon?" He said, "No, I injured my side, so I have to stop for a little while, just for about a month or so. And then I'm going to play here in a few months after that." "Oh, great." He
Oh,
said,
Vin
so
asked.
Farah says, "Oh, since I'm not playing, I started drawing and painting." And I said, "Oh, that's great." He said, "Can I see some of your pictures?" And I said, "Sure." So I'm showing him. He goes, "Oh, these are good." I said, "Thank you." Uh, uh, um, and the band that night was Charles Mingus. So he says, "Have you shown any of these to Mingus?" And I said, "No."
Shit.
And he started laughing. And he said, "Oh, afraid, huh?" I said, "Well, you know what?" He said, "Ming, come here, Ming." So now I'm sitting down and have Pharoah Sanders and Charles Mingus.
That's
And that
beautiful.
was kind of the start of it. Cats would come over all the time. Mingus always said hello. He was very friendly. Every time we talked every once in a while. Pharoah was cool. Other people started coming over to look at the stuff. I would give them for free and stuff. And so one time I was drawing some pictures, and we were at a Miles Davis concert, and Dave Holland came by, and he said,
Mm.
"Oh, can I?" Yeah. And so that's how I met him, and Chick Corea and Dave Liebman and
Mm.
others. And met Miles once or twice and all this stuff. And it was just like I didn't know it at the time, but it was like my training ground, like all the lessons that they would talk about in terms of music, that there were correlations in visual art. And I started to put those together. And then I started thinking about using my paintings as music notation, as a graphic score, because I had done a couple of live shows with Liebman and a dancer,
Mm.
and we called it the Intermediate Trio, and we had done a couple of things, and that was really cool. But it was not quite there, close, but not quite. I mean, the technology, there was no technology.
Sure.
So, I tried to do things later in life with laser beams and stuff to do like live drawing and create something, but it was too expensive at the time. But the whole thing about this is like I started to see that musicians kind of play the way they play, and if I wanted them to play my paintings really as notation, I would have to be more precise about what I wanted. And so I decided to buy a saxophone. I love the soprano, so I started on soprano, and then a friend of mine said, "Oh, Vinny, you should come out west and see the colors, and they're really vibrant and different." I quit my job. I got in a van and drove across the country to California. We stopped in, Arizona, New Mexico, all these places.
Ah, that's how this happened. Okay.
Yeah, so that was great. And then I met a woman in California. She came back with me. She didn't like New York, kept going back and forth 3 years. And then during that time, I was playing all that time because you couldn't set up and paint because it's
sure.
much of a process. So I got more into playing and decided like, okay, I could just write music now. I kind of learned, taught myself how to write music, but that took a while. And I had a lot of help coming up, mostly from the LA cats. New York cats, not all of them, but a couple of them were really like, they really thought I was nuts. I guess I was too old to start playing. 25 was too old. You're never really going to be that good. You're going to have to wait another lifetime.
This type of thing.
Yeah, and that only made me want to practice harder. So I mean, I did the long day thing, hours and hours and doing all that stuff. I mean, I'm sure I practiced totally incorrectly. So there were no guides.
Sure.
And I learned and lost gigs because I couldn't read, or I couldn't do this, or I didn't know how to play changes, or all that stuff coming up, like the hard lessons that you learn, and slowly but surely, I kind of saw the correlation between what I was doing with visual art to the music, and I just went that way.
Yeah.
I mean, as a matter of fact, my friend Ken, I was telling him something one time, and he started laughing like crazy, and I said, what's so funny? And he said, "You don't see it, do you?" I said, "See what?" He said, your music." I said, "What about it?" He said that it's visual. And I said, "What do you mean it's visual?" He said, "Well, on the paper, it's visual." He said, "You don't understand it because you're in it, but like it's colors. It's
Beautiful.
colors, it's like it's not like traditional harmony. It's different." And I didn't think too much about it, but every once in a while I think about what he says, and especially when I'm working on a project like like I did a this sounds pretentious, but I did a 12 when COVID hit. I was supposed to do this concert with 75 musicians. So I had started writing music, and COVID hit. So then I started using some live musicians like through the internet, sending parts, and then, but also I started using samples and created an orchestra from live musicians and samples. And then I invited soloists to play on top of this. So I see it more in that sense when that process, like working in a workstation, and putting things together in that way, much closer to painting than anything I've ever done before. And I think it's kind of becoming more of a great tool for me, you know. I like working that way. Some artificial and some real, and then improvisers who are really good
Really,
playing on the top.
yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I figured no one's going to give me an orchestra at this point. I mean, I'm chronologically I'm 76, so they haven't knocked down my door to say like, Vinny, we want you to write a piece for orchestra, you know.
No, but it's beautiful. I mean, the technology allows this now, and it sounds very convincing always. I mean, what I've heard, you know, the sound banks sound amazing now. What you can create with, it's incredible. But you know, you mentioned going to the West Coast, and in the beginning of our talk, we mentioned Bobby Bradford, and how did you hook up with these greats? You know, like with John Carter and Bobby Bradford, and like you seem to made like incredible, almost lifetime connections with these guys who are, you know, some of the best players out there, definitely. Like, how did this begin?
Well, when I first came out in '71, it's very strange. The band Circle, which was Chick and Dave and Braxton and Barry Alshaw. Yeah, they were doing a small tour, and they wound up in LA. So I saw an ad in the paper for this band called Circle, and I said, like, that can't be them because I'm in LA. And they live in New York. It's not possible, you know. I mean, plus, no offense to LA, but at that time, why would they come here?
Yeah.
Okay, so of course they weren't playing at the Lighthouse or you know, Concerts by the Sea, which were the Concerts by the Sea didn't exist then, but that was like the Lighthouse, you know, that was the place everybody played, which they eventually did play the next time they came. But so my girlfriend and I decided to go and see who they were, and if they weren't that good, we'd walk out, you know. Okay, so fine. So we go to this place, and it's a nice little place. And sure as hell, it's them. And I have my drawing stuff. So I just set up and I start drawing, and they're looking like, Vinny. And I'm going, Jack, you know, that was it. So Braxton didn't have a car, and I did. So he said, Vinny, he said, I'm going to go see these musicians, John Carter and Bobby Bradford. They have I said, I know, I have their records. So I was an avid collector of the music. And they said, oh, he says, you know them. So would you want to go? I said, yeah, let's go see them. So we drove to see them, and he introduced me to them. So then the next year I was to have a painting show in LA. And I was going to have live musicians play. They could play their own stuff and then play one piece would be playing one of the canvases. And that's how I met them. They said, sure, we'd love to do that, you know? And so then I moved around for a while. I did the painting show. Actually, Bob couldn't do it because Ornette had called him to do science fiction. So John played as a trio, but Bob had called me and said, like, Vinny, he said, I know you don't know me that well. I gave my word that I was going to play on your show. He said, but you know, Ornette has called me to play on this recording session, but since I gave my word to you, and I said, are you crazy? You missed the chance to record with Ornette because you went in the Air Force. I said, this is like full cycle. You got to go to New York and record. And he said, I just want to make sure you were cool. I said, no. And he went, and that's history, of course. Sure. And then I had traveled around. I came back to LA. He was playing at a restaurant called the Magic Apple with Glenn Ferris, great trombone player, and I think James Newton, a vibraphone player, and bass and drums. Kevin Brandon was a bass player, and the drummer probably was William Jeffrey. Anyway, I saw him. He said, "Oh, this must have been a little later in the 70s, maybe 74 or 5." He said, "Oh, it has to be 76 because the Clines were around." So he said, "I started a club." He said, "You should come by and draw some pictures." I said, "Oh, I kind of stopped drawing. I kind of switched into." You remember he can't come over my house to look at the paintings, and I guess to see if I was any good or not. And he saw the saxophone. He said, "You play saxophone?" I said, "No, I'm just learning." He said, "Let me see what you're working on." And I had these books, you know. He said, "Oh, these are good." He said, "Yeah, you could use that." And he sang everything, you know. Anyway, I said, "Oh, I'm just kind of playing saxophone." He said, "Really?" I said, "Well, you know," he said, "Well, why don't you bring that saxophone of yours over and we'll see what you can do." And I've been playing with him ever since.
Wow, that's
And
beautiful.
yeah, it was really cool. John would play. I mean, the front line, I mean, sometimes would be great. Sometimes it'd be like David Murray and me and James Newton and John Carter and Bobby. And bass might be Dresser or somebody like that, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, we had a blast. It was really cool. And then around 77, I made my first. I was playing in some other bands, but 77, that all these bands broke up, and I decided like this isn't enough of these collective things that you put all your time into and then they flake out. I'm just going to put a record of mine out, and that was Spirits and
That's how I
Fellowship.
decided. Yeah, I wanted to ask you that.
I did it with John.
Yeah.
And the second one I did with Bakita Carroll because Bakita had really liked the first record and expressed an interest, and I liked the second record actually, Open Hearted, and that's the first record that Nels Cline is on.
Yeah,
That's how it started, and then some of the people that I was playing with, like Roberto was playing with Horace Tapscott, so I got to meet Horace, and then I kind of expressed to Roberto like I'd really like to play with Horace. and eventually I played with him in Europe, and then I played with him with the Ark.
When is the first time you went to Europe actually as a musician? I mean, like, did you play
81? I think it was
81?
1981. That sounds about right. I think it was 81.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never had a lot of. I mean, I've been to Europe a number of times, but I haven't really done the thing like the way some of the New Yorkers have done it, just because at that time people thought it was more expensive. You'd have to fly from LA to New York, you know, and they could just get one person in that group to come right over. And I was offered a couple of gigs, but I'd have to use local rhythm sections. I did it once with a drummer that had played with John and Bob, so that was cool. But I had bands, and I felt like I should bring the band, you know, and that didn't really happen until 88, and we did well. I thought we really did well. Matter of fact, the recording Out for Blood, we were in Europe in March, and we decided, oh, we should record this group while it's hot.
Yeah.
And it took until almost December. I think we recorded it in November. I'm a little fuzzy about it. November, December. No rehearsal. We could only do one take on every tune. And that was it. We did it in 3 hours.
Oh,
it's one of my favorite recordings. I mean, a lot of the other stuff I've done is live. It's all live. like, 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours at the most. The more complicated things, like for strings, and the more chamber music-y things, took a little longer, and there was a little bit more editing and involved with that. but most of the small group things are just like, you just go in. That's the beauty of having a band,
Definitely.
People
Yeah.
they're hardly reading at all, because they know the music. I mean, the charts are there for safety. I don't know,
Yeah.
I mean, some of the tunes are a little gnarly at times, if you're coming in cold and there's no rehearsal. I mean, that's a lot to take in, So usually I send the music a little ahead of time, and then we run it once in the heads, and then, if there's an error, we can do a little insert or something. But to me, it's studio. That's like a whole different thing from recording, like
It is. Yeah.
live. Like if you're small group, live should be intimate and should just, the warts and everything should just be there.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
You mentioned spirits in fellowship, and you did your own label, like Nine Winds, and I know nowadays it's easier in a sense. We have all these, band camps and whatnot to make a label. It's so much easier, and to promote the music in a way, to send it. But like I know I've spoken to Tim Byrne and Jerry Hemingway and probably many other guys who, you were one of the first guys, like in the mid-70s, who actually were pioneering in starting this, putting out records on your own. Like, what was the trigger for that? And I mean, you've done it since then, like really successfully, actually. So
Thanks. Well, one of my good friends in New York was Paul Bley.
Okay.
And Paul was, aside from being like one of the most fantastic musicians I've ever met, he was a very astute businessman. Really astute, almost. The stories are legendary with him, So I had done one of these cooperative groups that had kind of broken up. Was a group where I was playing like a fusion of Indian music and kind of improvised, not really jazzy, but a little bit, And I had sent it to him, and he basically said, "Well, it's a nice recording, but you're an unknown. I'm not the wrong guy, But it had this fantastic Indian violinist on it named L. Subramaniam, and I thought it was pretty good. But when the band broke up, there was all this like little infighting about money and all this stuff, and and Subramaniam didn't want the recording. He gave me a 2-year window. If it didn't come out by then he didn't want it to come out. And I respected that, and I never put it out. But when that group broke up, I said, like, well, okay, we couldn't sell that other tape. And that had L. Subramaniam on it. It was like one of the world's, I mean, if there are 10 great violin players living in the world, he's one, So I decided, like, I would do as much research as possible into, having your own label. And at that, just before I recorded, I had helped John Carter. I was working, I was trading like work for studio time at this small studio in Venice, California. And like just working as second engineer, like putting up my stuff, nothing big. And John had a project that he did, so I helped him record that. And James Newton had put out 2 records on his own label. Then he had gone to New York and got with Indian Navigation, so he wasn't going to revisit that anymore, and John really didn't have any options until Gramavision showed up. because they would record a lot with this guy John Hardy, who had Revelation Records.
Mm.
And so I decided, like, no one's interested in these guys who are getting a lot of press and are famous. I'm just starting out. No one's going to really bother me, so I should put out myself. So I put out the first 3 records on 9 Winds that were mine, until the distributors started to say, like, I didn't use my real name when I was doing the business part.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't know they were talking to me, you know. So
Smart,
so,
smart, actually. That's smart.
I don't know where that came from, but I just
That's
started
cool.
doing it. Yeah. So they would tell me things like, they'd say, like, well, you know, we like the records, but he's got 3 now. And is that all the label's going to do? Because then it's just going to be like a vanity label, you know? Excuse me. So I decided to do some of my friends, and, you know, some of my friends didn't have an outlet, you know. I mean, I didn't pay for it. Stuff, you know, we used like money, collective money, but I wound up doing all the work, and I wound up out of my pocket doing all the promotion, which at that time isn't like it is now. I mean, send one record from LA to England, it's going to close to $20.
Sure.
You know, one recording, whether it's a CD or an LP, it doesn't matter. Back then, I could send 3, 5 CDs or even a package of LPs to Europe for like $8. So I was sending everything we did. I had a list. I kept upgrading it. I talked to distributors. I did all that stuff, not as my own name, but as another name, you know, and that's what the people got at for their money. You know, they paid for their production and stuff like that, but I did all this other stuff that was extra. And a lot of people started to notice the West Coast from the label, which was great.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Tom Abach came around, and we started talking because he really loved Horace's music. So I said, well, I'll tell you everything I know, you know. And we would talk quite often about like how this distributor is paying, this distributor is not paying, this is getting stuff into the stores, this guy's not getting stuff into the stores. And he started doing all the people associated with Horace, so he covered the Black community pretty well. I only had 1 or 2 cats that were Black on the label, but not for any reason except that, you know, Tom was taking care of it, and they would just go to him. So we started branching out. We had people from Vancouver, that's the farthest north we got, down into Mexico.
Wow.
And so we were, you know, that became kind of a unified face, and a lot of people on the West Coast did their festivals based around people on 9 Winds. That's how they knew who they were, you know. So it was really fantastic, but it really originally was just for me to get some of my music out there, you know. Anyway, and now it's kind of condensed again, because now most of people, you know, I mean, a couple of people have gone off to start their own labels, like Jeff Gaudier started Crypto Gramophone. And I don't think he's running. I don't know if it's still functioning or not, but I'm just doing my stuff, but mostly in collaborative sense. So there are other small labels like PF Mentum. So I'll say like, oh, let's put out a project together. And that helps, because it's kind of
definitely
a little bit like that, you know. Yeah, I mean, the box set of the orchestra music, that was a 12 CD set, and that came out with me and Jeff. He got me some people to do the artwork and a few other things like that. But that worked pretty well, and now he's closed up shop. So I'm still doing it, but I'm on a much smaller personal level.
Scale. Yeah.
But in doing the research, I mean, like, you know, Mingus was a great model for being one of the first cats to do his own label. And then for a while, I mean, to help this, I never liked taking jobs in music itself, you know, playing. I mean, I played in blues bands and stuff like that, backing up some singers and things like that, but that's not my thing. So I would work like I worked for Rhino Records, I worked for, you know, Sweet Beat Records, VJ Records, you know, all these kind of these smaller labels, and I learned the business really well.
Yeah.
You know, and that was really helpful. And a lot of cats came to me for information, and some misused it and some used it well, I think, you know. But I did have the info, and I had some connections that they could use.
Yeah.
That worked out. I think that was a good thing, but I can't do that now. It's just too much.
It's
I
too
mean,
much.
it's
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
work, you know? Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but it's an incredible, like you said, you know, many guys got known in a sense through Nine Winds, and you've created an amazing amount of work and your own stream, which is rare, and that's important. You know, it's your own story. And
Well, I think the document, I mean, that's the one thing Paul was really big about. He would always say like, well, he says, I know you don't think so now, but it's very important to document what you're doing and really have it. And Braxton was that way too. Well, Braxton, you know, his catalog is really huge. I mean, the only person who comes close to Braxton is Steve Lacy.
Yeah, exactly.
They have really huge catalogs, but they're both really, really like very meticulous about all facets of their art and really making sure that everything is covered.
Yeah.
There's a, you know, incredible amount of documentation now. But when you want to do the research, it's, you know, I mean, Lucky Thompson, you can find only a few Lucky Thompson records, you know, and he was on Muse or Steeplechase and stuff. He had one or two obscure things, you know, but his early stuff, you can't find any early, you know, so you can only find a musician from one area of his catalog, and that gives us a skew. Yeah.
True. Yeah.
You had Luther Backen on the other day. You know, that's another guy, like a guy who like really doesn't all his stuff should have been documented more because of all the. I mean, he's a really incredible musician. You know, with what he covers and stuff like that. But the recording is a bit sporadic. You know.
Yeah.
Not his fault. You know.
No, definitely no. But that's good. It's fantastic that you always catch a moment in time where you are, and it's part of your life, right?
Yeah.
Musical and personal, actually. So
well, this is the thing, because like if you go to a record, right, and you pick up one record, that's how people judge somebody, but that's like 3 hours of their time in their entire life. You know, I mean, you don't know what happened that day. You know, they could have gotten in a car accident on the way to the thing, or they could have broken up with their wife or girlfriend that day, boyfriend, you know, and that could have been mirrored in that. I mean, what if the only record of Charlie Parker was the one where he's drunk?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that almost happened because of the recording ban. So that's a really good example. And one of the cats who gets like left out of all the talk about history, like large bebop groups, is Earl Hines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, awesome.
Right? So there's no documentation except like one video clip someplace. And Dizzy's the same way, you know. So not that I think like everything that I do should be recorded or whatever. Matter of fact, at this point in time, I'm into like a little less recording, but I'm happy that at least, you know, it's there from the beginning until now. You can kind of see some different interest and stuff like that. I mean, unfortunately, most cats don't do that kind of research. So they like know you from, let's say, 77, 78. Yeah. Oh, I like your solo record. Which one? The one I just did? Or oh no, that one where you're on the cover, like you're sitting down. Oh, okay, so 1980. Okay, well then, you know, That's that's some time ago now.
That is, yeah, it's bizarre. Yeah. No, you mentioned Braxton had such a huge over of work, and he does, of course, But you also played with him, like on the Cone Creative Orchestra, right? And
Yeah.
just the players on that one, I think that's one of my favorite players ever. Like that band, it's just.
Oh, it was amazing. I
How
mean,
did you become part of that one, actually? Like,
sheer luck.
oh,
Sheer luck. I had gone to visit Anthony, and I walk into his place. He was living up in Woodstock. Hey, come on up, Vinny. Okay, so I come up. He's got all of these students on the floor, and at the time, I didn't know they were all like good musicians. It's like Marilyn Crispell on the floor copying parts. All these people copying parts, and it's like, okay, what am I getting into? The phone rings. We're talking. We're having like I can't remember. Like tea or something like that. We're talking. Phone rings. Oh, I have to take this. Okay, great. So he hangs the phone up, and he looks at the people on the floor, and he says, "The concert is on. We're going." And that everyone is cheering and doing this stuff. I have no idea. I'm just, there for a visit. He's my friend. This has nothing to do with music, right? And he says, "You're all going. You're all going." And he looks at me, and I'm like, "Vinny, you want to go?" And I said, "Sure, I want to go." And then he realizes, because he knew me like as a painter. Then he realizes I've only been playing 5 years. Even though I have a document and he heard it and he liked it and whatever, but I haven't been playing that long. And he goes like, "Oh, come with me." And he takes a chart and he goes like, "Can you read this?" "Yes." "Yes." He said, "Okay. You're in." I said, "What do you want me to bring?" "Everything." And it's like, okay. And it was close. I made it by the skin of my teeth. I would stay up nights, I would stay up nights in bed with covers over me and pillows around the horn, like with a flashlight, looking at these charts, like getting the rhythms and shit like that.
yeah, it's heavy. Yeah.
I had never even seen 3 against 4, let alone 7 against 5 over 4. It was like I was like out of my element, and I really worked hard to get it, and I have to say that I got it. First rehearsal in Europe, this is great. The first rehearsal in Europe, Braxton says, "Oh yeah, Vinny, we're going to play that, what do you call it, tune?" "Okay." He said, the time tune." "Yeah, okay." He said, "At the end, trade fours with Kenny Wheeler." It's like, really? Really? So the tune, we're playing the tune, and afterwards Kenny comes up and he goes, "Oh, Vinny." I said, I know, I'll work on it. I read it." He said, No. He said, "I was going to apologize for not keeping up." And I said, because Kenny, I didn't know it, but Kenny, like, he was like one of these guys that
the humblest people. Yeah. That's incredible, man.
And then I was playing. JD had brought alto clarinet. I brought bass clarinet, but I said, "Hey JD, can I play your alto clarinet for a minute?" And he said, "Sure." So I'm playing the alto clarinet, and Kenny came over and said, "Oh man, you sound good on the alto clarinet." And I said, "Oh, thanks." So I went and got one right. I went and bought a clarinet. Kenny Wheeler says, "You sound good. Go get it."
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It was amazing for me because it was like the first time, like I was like in amongst people who were like, they were much better players, but we were all in the same stage of our career.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter so much. I mean, Joe Bowie and Luther. Well, Luther wasn't on it, but he was around. Leo Kenny, of course, you know,
Ray Anderson was there, and
yeah, I
Marty
mean,
Ehrlich, Nadia, and all these guys.
I was like, whoa, you know,
Yeah.
and I had a, I had a great time, and the music started to play easier, you know,
Oh, sure.
and it was like, oh, okay, so this is like what it means. Like even when Coltrane talk about, oh, you hit an area, then you can stay there for a while, and then you have to push it and go to the next one and the next one, and that goes back to your original question, see, because it's like you know, that creates that energy that you need to keep pushing yourself, because otherwise you get complacent and then the music suffers.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But that was. And it's also the first time, like that was 78. So that's the first time Europeans had ever seen me. And that went pretty, I'll tell you a really funny story.
Oh, please. Yeah.
Our first concert was in Cologne.
Oh.
So I was telling you about that. Okay. So we played Cologne first. They recorded that. I wish they would. I know they recorded the Paris concert. I thought personally, and I think everybody thought that was our best concert. The playing was spectacular. But okay, so the second concert is Moore's Festival.
Okay.
Moore's Festival, you play outside and it's kind of open, and people sit in Braxton raises his arms to conduct. When he comes down on the downbeat, torrential downpour.
Wow.
People sat in the rain. They just put things like raincoats over their heads and stuff. They're sitting in the mud and in the rain. We're playing, and I'm thinking, like, this is astounding, right? We're doing our thing, and it's raining. The rain is starting to come on the stage and stuff like that. And he gives the last downbeat like this, and the rain stops. And Braxton, we played through 1 hour, right through the rain. And Braxton says, gentlemen, you just made history. and at the end of it, Leo Smith comes up to Braxton and says, Braxton, I can't play your music anymore. And Anthony gets all worried. What, Leo, what's wrong? Do you need different parts? What? He says, no, I can't play it. He said, are you leaving? What's happening? And Leo says, no, I can't play it. All this music I washed off. All the music I played, because it was handwritten, it all washed off the page.
Shit, man.
And James Emery was playing guitar, almost got killed because the water was coming on, and every time he hit his pedal, he'd get a shock. But he needed to hit his pedal, so you were like he'd be playing like.
That's funny. That's bizarre. That's bizarre.
Yeah, that was I owe Anthony a lot for him sticking with me, and I just saw him 2 weeks ago. We played a festival in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Yeah, he was doing well. He sounded really good. He did a duo with James Fay and electronics. Really cool. Amazing. Yeah. He's like one of my oldest friends, and he's been very, very supportive from the time I switched over to, and the guy I thought that would be the harshest critic was Liebman, and he was very supportive, very, very supportive. Vincent, he always calls me Vincent. Vincent, too many notes, playing too many notes. You gotta slow down so people hear the notes. Little things, just little things. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It's a whole other trip, because I was staying I was staying with him. I had broken up with this woman, and I was waiting to get I had a loft downtown. I sublet a loft, and I was waiting for the people to go out and do stuff. It was Bob Moses' loft,
Nice.
so it was a great place to paint, and was really cool. But I came home with a brand new Selmer soprano, and he didn't even have one then, which is kind of hard to believe, but yeah. But yeah, and so he's sitting in a chair, he's reading a newspaper. So I just came home with this new soprano. Of course, I want to open it and blow in it, right? Because I want to do it, you know. I don't know anything about it. It's a saxophone, and I don't know anything about music, so it's going to be a trip. So it's going to sound horrible, which is another story for when I bought the horn. But so Dave is sitting there, and he's every once in a while he's doing this, like checking it out. So I take it out, and I'm polishing it. It's brand new, so it doesn't need to be polished. But I'm, doing that, and I'm looking at the reed. I take the reed, I put it on there like as best as I know how to put it on there. I'm doing stuff to put the mouthpiece. I'm looking at it, and finally I'm just about to blow, and I go like, he goes, Vincent, not like that, like this, feel my throat. It was like all these things about saxophone, like a machine gun. Like, John,
That's funny, man.
That's really funny.
And I see Liebman saying these things. Actually, I see him now.
But he has this thing of like where he likes to be like like that, but he's really a softie, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
Beautiful.
He said, feel my throat. This is how the muscles work. This is it. Your embouchure has to be this. He said, soprano's tighter. I mean, like all these really helpful hints, and really, it's really cool. Really cool.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. Oh shit! What happened?
Yeah.
Nothing. Oh, okay, moved it. No, but yeah, it's incredible. Just to hear you talk these stories with so many musicians, man, that you play, like, from Bar Phillips to Peter Koval to some, and just goes on, like incredible, So yeah.
I've been very, 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 very fortunate. People seem to gravitate to the sounds I make, and it's nice. And then when you play with people who do that on their instrument, you get some really, really
amazing stuff.
Yeah, you get some cool stuff, and it pushes you. Just pushes you to just be better all the time. I know there's plenty of cats out there that are much better technically than I am and do a bunch of stuff much better than me. That's fine. I just happen to be fortunate, and somebody gravitates to me, and I like that. I mean, playing with Bar was like he's one of those guys. Like, I had his record, the first record. I walked into a store and bought it by accident. It's like, oh, this looks good. Okay. Well, I didn't know anything about, him or the fact that it was a solo bass record. I didn't read the cover well. I just looked cool. I think this is, that you could feel the record, it's like you could feel it, like this is going to be really good. You put it on, and then it's like, wow, that's different, and he's one of a kind. I mean, playing with him was like, you learn a lot about like playing dynamically.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Yeah. I mean, for him, it's like all about the sound. He just plays it he's Bertoretsky's that way too. It's like the sound he makes is like it's just like whoa, like you're in an orchestra, but it's one person, you know. Yeah, it's really quite staggering. And I've been lucky with bass players.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh, that's for sure. That's for sure. That's a safe bet there. I mean, in general, so you know.
Well, to me, that's like I like. I mean, I mean, the music all starts at the bottom. It's often for me, you know, it's like often I hear the bass line way before I hear the rest of the stuff. Sometimes the stuff on the top is filler. So I'll fill in, you know, even the melody. It's like, oh, let me sing something, you know. It's like, oh, but the bass line is like, yeah. So
the foundation,
you know,
yeah.
If you don't have that, then your music is gonna like, gonna implode, you know.
Definitely, yeah. But Vinny, I wanted to ask you, like, also for what's on your agenda for the upcoming weeks or let's say months, like project-wise? Are you writing some new stuff or like preparing something new? Or
I'm doing actually part 2 of the orchestra stuff. There's 3 movements.
Fantastic! Oh man, okay.
Yeah, and it started out. Part 2 started out where it was going to be metal band and orchestra.
Ooh, oh, that would have been.
Yeah, but it morphed a little bit into like more electronic people, mostly electronic soloists and orchestra, and then me and a couple of vocalists and one or two more traditional like trumpet stuff. I like one guy plays quarter tone flugelhorn. One cat plays regular straight trumpet, really virtuosic trumpet, very nice. So I have there are about 24 improvisers so far. And no, 2 days ago, I did my next to the last overdub session, and I have one more session to do where I finish up, and then the second movement will be done. I just have to organize it into like I did with the other ones, like different. Each module will be a complete module. Yeah, but there's for the first project had 10.5 hours of music.
Wow.
And this has 15.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so it's going to be a little bigger, but I think, and then I have to figure out if I'm gonna. I'll make a limited edition of CD box sets and and then I'll go from there. So that's one thing that's happening. I'm doing I told you the tribute to Braxton, playing on that with Steve Lehman, and I don't know his first name. Finlayson.
Oh, Jonathan Finlayson. Yeah.
Jonathan, and I think Tyshawn Sorry.
Oh yeah, okay.
A few others and some other things. So we're doing that on December 4th. I have a small, like at school, I have a large ensemble, but it's always like very mixed orchestrationally. So this year was 3 pianos, 2 guitars, vocalist, 2 violins, and 3 horns and bass.
Wow.
So I wrote music for that, and we'll play that at a concert. And then I have some small group stuff, like some trios.
Fantastic.
So there's a fair amount now to the end of the year, and then I'll take a small break from writing because I feel like I don't want to keep writing the same kind of music.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So I'm doing a little research on tonal music and the use of although I already have this part down a little bit, South Indian rhythms in contemporary music.
Okay.
So like applying some of those metric modulations into the new stuff. So with it being harmonic and it being metric, I need a little bit more time to study because I don't have that under my fingers, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then toying with the idea of doing another solo record, which I haven't done. Yeah.
Man, okay. So, rounding it out nicely, I started our talk like with how being so creative, and now I mean there's the answer. Like that's man, fantastic, beautiful. Looking forward to the new stuff and everything. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you keep track. I'm glad somebody's listening.
Yeah,
I can't,
try.
but you know, sometimes I can't tell. And I think it's just like blowing smoke in the wind, and then somebody there's a young guy that's been corresponding with me over the last month, and he's researching my entire catalog. So he asks these very pertinent questions about compositional things, and you know, and very much into the large ensemble music. So he's exploring these aspects of the large ensemble, and he's gone all the way from like he's found, I don't know how he found it, but I found the first three LP box set. He found one.
Wow.
And he's been traveling through time.
That's beautiful.
And it's scary, you know, like you realize like, you know, like you can't take this stuff lightly. People are listening, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah, it's out there. So
cool.
But cool, Vinny. Thanks so much.
Oh man, I'm glad you asked me to do this. That's very I'm very touched. Thank you with all the great players that you interviewed, and that's really thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing some of these thoughts. You know, it's really inspiring to hear your talk and so
anytime. I like talking about.